like to call the Village Departmental meeting to order. If you would stand for a moment of silence, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, welcome everyone, and welcome everyone watching at home. Madam Clerk, call the roll.
Trustee Carter?
Present.
Trustee Mariscal?
Present.
Trustee Kazam?
Present.
Trustee Gett?
Present.
Trustee Weisenberg?
Present.
Trustee DeVore?
Present.
Okay, everyone here, fantastic. We would be at approval of the minutes from the departmental meeting on Tuesday, June 2nd, 2020. I'd ask for a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved.
Second. Oh, sorry.
Motion and a second. Any questions or corrections to the minutes? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion to approve the minutes signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The ayes have it. We would be at comments from the audience. Anyone would like to address the board, please come forward tonight, give your name and address, and try and keep it to 5 minutes or less. Comments from the audience? Going once? Going twice? Comments from the audience are closed. We would be, oh, I'm sorry, there is one event that has been pulled, an event proposal from Envision Events presented by Rachel Honiger. They've asked us to pull that from the agenda. So we would be at old business. Any old business to come before the board? Let's go right into new business then. The first is Public Works, Trustee Carter. We have an action item, approval of spray patching contract not to exceed $25,000. Trustee Carter?
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion.
Thank you. Can I have a second?
Second.
Okay, go ahead, Cheryl.
Okay, so what this is, if you remember the last time, I think it was like Ace in the Hole or something that was gonna do the spray patch, but couldn't come up with the proper paperwork that we needed. So what Herman and Associates did, they went back out to re-quote it to be a lesser quote. So that way the guidelines are not as strict, easy terms, I guess. So it looks like we got a quote in from Mid-State Asphalt for under $25,000. I think it's like $24,000. Oh my gosh. 24,810.
It's this. It's a separate sheet.
810.50. So I make a motion, and this will only do part of it, and then next year we'll bid it again to get the other part to finish it. So I make a motion or I did make a motion, so.
Yeah, we did. We
anybody
have
has any
that.
questions?
Mike, anything you want to add before we take questions?
No, I'm just glad we got somebody else, and with that, it came in a little lower than 25,000, so happy with that.
Okay. Any questions, trustees?
Yeah, so Ace in the Hole lost the bid when they bid it again, or they just didn't bid?
I don't think they bid, did
They
they?
didn't bid again, no.
Okay.
No. Just bid today.
Have we used Mid-State before?
Yes.
Anyone else? Madam Clerk, call the roll.
Trustee Carter?
Aye.
Trustee Mariscal?
Aye.
Trustee Kazam?
Aye.
Trustee Gett?
Aye.
Trustee Weisenberg?
Aye.
Trustee DeVore?
Aye.
All right, that passes. Next is Village Hall and Public Works Grant Lighting Project. Go ahead, Trustee Carter.
Okay, this is just a discussion item. I think Mike and the chief went through and got a lighting project from Ameren, I do believe it's from.
Which is Titan Lighting. I got Evan here too to discuss it and go over the worksheet that he came up with to change all the LED, and then we get some grant stuff from Ameren. He knows more than I do, so I can have him come up here. So, and it's the Village Hall and the Public Works Garage. So over 10 months, 18 months, which should pay for itself, somewhere around there. So.
And the Village Hall, and it's going to cost $1,310, and then to do the street garage, Public Works Garage, is going to cost $656 to change the lighting, which will save us in the long run.
Mm-hmm.
So this will be on the agenda as an action item then at the board meeting? Is that what you want?
Yes.
If you have any questions, I got Evan, if you'd like to have any questions about the program or the grant. I can have him come up.
Awesome. Yeah.
So we're
You can come up
applying
there.
for a grant? Or we're applying
It's-
for,
He'll explain it all
Okay,
to you. It's
okay.
part of the through Ameren.
So I'm Evan Grifford. I'm with Titan CC Lighting. I'm a program ally with Ameren, Illinois. The program that we are applying for is called the Small Business Direct Install Program. It's more of an incentive program rather than a rebate program. The Village Hall, Ameren's paying an additional $1,126 towards that lighting project. That's part of the program itself. You guys do not have to come up with the money, all the money up front. You just have to come up with your portion, which is that $1,310 for that building and the
656?
$656 for the other building. And then once the project's complete, we submit it to Ameren for final approval, and they send us a check for the remaining balance.
Okay.
Good.
We've already been approved for it, though?
We have to get a pre-approval. What we need for a pre-approval, I already have the worksheets here that we'll need signatures on certain pages. I'll need a W-9 from you guys and a copy of your utility bill for each building. Once I have that, I submit it. Right now, there's plenty of money. It will get approved. It takes about 3 to 4 days to get approved, and once it's approved, we schedule the install.
When are you submitting and when is the deadline?
So the deadline is till the end of the year, or as funds are available. Usually they run out around October out of
Okay.
funds for these programs. But yeah, once I have the signatures and everything I need, I can submit the project for pre-approval.
And the board members that were on the council at the time, this is similar to the project of the police department years ago that we did, so.
And also the street garage, we did relighting too with the T5 bulbs, but now we go to LED and save more money, so.
And last year, the Peoria Heights High School took advantage of the same program.
Is Tower Park eligible? Did we look at
We're just gonna do these first.
Okay.
Move out there and
Got
then
it.
lighting down Prospect to change those LED.
Mike, thank you. I think I mentioned that to you one day that it came about because of the water leak in the township, and you had those lights in there replaced, and I thought those looked fantastic, and a few days later, you had this program rolled out, so thank you very much for doing that. And then we'll have this on as an item for approval, okay. Thank you very much. Thanks for being here.
A few other questions, if I
Yeah,
could.
go ahead.
So are these new lights, are they brighter?
So yes, what we're doing for these lights, what this proposal is proposing is using your same light fixtures that you have currently in place. We're going to bypass that ballast and put LED tubes in.
Okay.
The LED tubes now have their own internal drivers on them, so you'll never have to worry about a ballast again, which is one
That would probably
advantage.
make Mike happy.
But yeah, they will be brighter, and they'll burn about half the wattage is what
Half the
you're
wattage.
burning.
Now, is this program eligible for any of the street lamps the street lights that the village has?
There is separate programs for the streetlights. I can put some together for you, but it's a different program, but I'm also involved in that program as well with Ameren.
Yeah, because I know we get a lot of complaints about our streets being dim, and I know the LEDs burn a lot brighter.
Yeah,
than
definitely.
the other street lights do.
Yeah, we can
So-
handle that too, yeah.
You're talking about the streetlights in
That
The
the village
neighborhood.
has, that's village has.
in the
yeah.
neighborhood, 'cause I know we did it down
Right.
Prospect.
I know there's a
but we
mix.
did- That light in front of my house.
There's a mix.
I know there's a mix. We don't own all of them, but
Yeah.
But yeah, we can definitely check that too, so.
I know we are replacing those with LEDs though if they go out, so if you have one that's out and you call it in, you can have them replace it with an
right.
LED.
What if it's not out? And you just want our street to be brighter? If they're damaged? Probably.
Thank you.
Yep, no problem.
That'd be before-
Okay, Trustee Carter, would be it an ordinance providing for the vacation of an alley between Glen and Samuel?
Okay, so this is a discussion item, and I guess I'm really up for discussion on exactly what's happening. What do they want? Is Mr. Travis here? He's not.
I don't think anybody's here. I'd be happy to field this if you
Okay.
like.
I
Yeah,
can't
if you
really
would.
see anything.
Okay.
I don't want to keep around his house either.
So this is just a request that came into the village. This alley has been used as a driveway by the people that own the house on Glen. They also own the lot behind them, so they have what amounts to a very long, narrow lot.
Okay.
And they've been using part of what was platted as an alley, but it's never, I don't think it's paved all the way through, is it? It's just grass on the Samuel side, on the north end, on Glen, it's their driveway, so if you drive by it, you're gonna be like, what alley? What are you talking about? But it was platted and dedicated to the village, so the only way to unwind that is to vacate the alley. So since it's one homeowner that owns all the way north and south from Glen down to Samuel on the west side of the alley, on the east side of the alley fronts on, is it Columbus or Constantine, what is it? Constantine. And that's the doctor's house that, basically runs that whole length as well. They approved it, they said, they've been using it, we didn't know that they didn't own it, let them have it. So we've got a letter of approval, that's really all we need. Typically, we ask for some payment when we give up property. Some token that, now they paid for the appraisal, for the survey that's attached here as part of the ordinance. So, I don't know, it doesn't seem like we need to, request any large amount from them.
And I believe the last time we vacated property, that's all we asked, I think the Wigingtons, was that they pay for the appraisal and everything else. I would say stay consistent.
And the attorney fees.
Right.
And that one was involved because there were a lot of
Yeah.
property owners, there was a lot of communication back and forth, and it took 6 months. This one,
Right.
I don't have a lot of time in it.
Okay.
I think $500 would be fair and reasonable.
Well, we did that on Hunter's Trace, we did it on Brockway fairly recently, within the
Yeah.
last year and a half or so.
So do we have like a variance that we need to keep a hold of in that alley? I mean, alleys would.
I don't
we have
think
any
that we
alleys
have
need-
any utilities in there
You're
unless,
just talking about the south, the grassy area, the south of his driveway? Or
Yeah,
you talking about
north and-
because
yeah,
it T, it used to T there.
Yep.
And we have a storm sewer that runs down there, the
So
alley.
when we
and the sewer.
vacate it, we're gonna, and I believe the ordinance even says, subject to any.
Easement.
Subject to all easements of record.
Okay, because the sanitary sewer runs through there too.
Yep,
so.
yep. So I'll clarify, including, for when this is on the actual agenda for approval, I'll clarify, including sanitary.
And they had AT&T back there too. There's old boxes. If they're in use, I don't know, because I don't have a landline anymore. But there is one back there.
Just
So I'll
thinking
make that
If we have
clarification
anything
for-
back there, we need to make sure that we have access to it.
Right, especially sanitary
Yeah.
district. So,
That's,
But I mean-
that is in here, so like I say, I'll clarify specifically the sanitary, but what about water?
no water, no. Just storm, we have storm sewer back there though, so.
Well, we'll move that for final action, but if you have any concerns, we can always defer that at the board meeting. But you'll get out and take a look at it, Mike?
Yeah.
Okay, all right, thank you. Trustee Carter, anything else?
All right, do we have, Dave, you got anything? All right, that's good news.
All right, thank you all for that. We'll move on to economic development, several things here. All discussion items tonight. The first is an ordinance amending Title III, Chapter 3 of the Village Code of the Village of Peoria Heights for the purpose of amending the hotel and motel room renting tax. Trustee Kazam?
I will defer to council on this. I do have a few questions, but if you could explain, council, exactly what this is. I think have we never had a hospitality?
No, we did.
We did, okay.
We did. This is something that came from Azavar, am I pronouncing that right? The company that we hired to sort of audit all of the, money that's supposed to be coming into the village, whether it's the telecommunications tax, cable, there's all kinds of small tax things that we're supposed to get, but they're impossible for us to monitor because it's on a, village-wide basis. And this was one of the things they recommended. Now, our ordinance was a standard ordinance. They are trying to make sure that we capture all of these online rentals, your
Bed and breakfast.
all the, everything, not just hotels. I mean, we clearly had hotels covered, but any kind of online rental that's less than 30 days, whether
So,
it's VRBO.
I was going to say, is it
or
Airbnb and VRBO?
Airbnb,
Okay.
any of those websites, there's more of them every day. So it's really just an effort to recast it in a way that we're making sure we're not missing out on any income from those.
Okay. So what is the recommendation of the tax increase specifically? Do you know?
Well, I think the standard is 5%,
Okay,
and we're going to keep it at 5%.
Okay.
That's what it is currently.
So this will be an action item at the board meeting.
Yep.
Questions?
Yeah, question. Does Peoria have a tax on Airbnb?
I'm sure they
I
do.
think they do, yeah.
Yes.
How is that going to be enforced?
Well, that's just it. It's difficult to enforce, but they can actually monitor, registrations by zip code, is my understanding.
They isn't, who's they?
Well, the Azavar would be the ones that would do it. We're not going to do it. I mean, we don't have the staff to,
Right.
Trustee
That's who we
Weisenberg.
pay.
So I've been talking to Azavar about this, and specifically what they've told me is that when they have this ordinance in place, that Airbnb and the larger companies like this are compliant, that they generally want to work with municipalities as long as the language is in this specific thing, that Azavar also has some online portals that they will be giving these companies access to allow them to pay the tax, which they said also greatly helps with compliance. So essentially, they've made a list of recommendations, including this ordinance, that will make it so that it's easy on the company to comply. And so the company will then comply because it's better for them to do that than to risk any sort of lawsuit or anything like that.
Okay. And
So what
is
if we
this,
have what if I want to do it?
yeah, that's what
Personally,
I'm
if I
trying to get
wanted,
around
because there's a
to.
couple of them around here in the Heights that does it.
What if
that
it's not
puts
a
in-
business? What if it's
It's
just,
just a,
I think we
Good
already
resident.
collect a $75 fee. Would it fall under that? You know, the fee if, for example, if we're
rental
renting
registration
out
fee?
rental registration.
in theory.
Yes, probably.
But that's not, we're
If
not
they do that,
capturing all
if
the
they comply, yeah.
money. But
that's
yeah.
interesting.
So.
That's up to us, so
Yeah.
I think what happens is, if you just rent to your nephew Sam, nobody's
Yeah.
gonna know,
Right.
and we're never gonna discover it. If you're listing your place on Airbnb, VRBO,
Site, yeah.
any of those other websites, then they're gonna tell you as a term and condition, if you go for $100 a night, we tack $5 on for the
Okay.
village, and we automatically transfer it, as I'm understanding, through this portal. If you pass it on to the customer, so it's just a
Right. Okay,
5%
that's interesting.
knock to the customer. It doesn't, and I think the rental registration site takes care of it, not necessarily the property owner.
so what if someone, all they use the property for is Airbnb? Are they on our rental property inspection and we're sending, what's his name? Shane?
They sure should.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
I mean, if they're not, they're in violation of our ordinance, then we could.
Yeah, he does.
Well, then would we need an ordinance that would require anyone doing business as an Airbnb to register with the village?
They automatically fall under our rental registration if it's.
Automatically.
Yeah.
Do
I'll
we-
take a look at that and see if, if there's any reason to clarify it, but they would fall under that.
Okay.
I'm not saying there aren't people out there doing it that aren't registered, but
Is there any information on our website, like if you just were like, I'm gonna buy this house and make it a rental property, how to find out that information fairly easily? Or do you have to like go through all the ordinances to find it?
There's a section on landlord registration on our website.
Okay.
It's got its own tab.
Okay, sorry.
No, I'm sorry, I interrupted you. I was thinking that I've had a few friends who are realtors in the area who have suggested to me that if a home, like for example, if I owned a second home and was renting it out on Airbnb or VRBO, that our fee should be higher because it's a responsibility, for many reasons. Like, first of all, we have a higher rental rate in Peoria Heights, and we want to make sure that they're responsible renters. I'm sure that the VRBO website and Airbnb, I've rented through them before. If it's not what they say it is, you get a bad review, but just to kind of help keep things in check and then make responsible landlords. I don't know, it's a comment on my part, I don't know what the right answer is. I can get more information, though.
Yeah, if you would investigate that a little further and.
I will.
Okay. So let's go on to the next discussion item, site plan approval application filed by the KDB Group LLC and Atrium Hotel LLC, seeking approval of a site plan for development of a hotel on the property located at 4615 North Prospect Road. Go ahead, Trustee Kazan.
So I think that we've all seen these site plans a couple different times over the last 6 months, right, Mr. Birkeland?
That's correct.
They're beautiful. Everything that comes out of, I think, Farnsworth and your team seems to be really attractive. It's in keeping with, it's a Doyle building, isn't it, originally?
Correct.
So it's in keeping with that original architecture, and it's very pretty. I don't know if you have any other comments about it, but
No, you're correct, it is very beautiful. It's very unique. It's It's not going to be your standard Super 8 or even a Marriott. It's
No,
going to be.
it's a beautifous boutique-style
We're not
hotel
gonna leave
that
July then?
reflects, I think, the architecture of our village, like the historic architecture.
Pacific is very high for sure.
Okay.
Discussion?
So you're gonna have, is the hotel gonna be like right on Prospect? Or is it gonna be behind
Greg,
it?
would you mind, so everyone can hear you at home? I know we can all hear you here, but just want to make sure everyone at home hears the answer.
Greg Berkland with the KDB Group. The pre-existing structure as it is right now will still stay intact, but what's going to be behind it in that alley will be the 4-story hotel rooms itself.
Okay, so 4 stories, it's not gonna like, because it seems like I went to one zoning and somebody was hoping that it wasn't gonna be taller than the apartment complex, so you
That's-
don't get the view.
That's correct. Yeah, we want to try to marry what Larry Herman's done across the street as far as the same kind of height.
Yeah, it's not gonna be that tall, right?
No, it's going to be that tall, yeah.
Oh, it is? So
Yeah, it'll be 4 stories, for like 54 feet or something like that.
Which honestly, I think because Larry's building is very tall, it might actually balance things out a little bit. I don't know how
Yeah.
you feel about it.
That was one of the problems we came into, because when I looked at Marriott, Sheraton, and everybody else, they were wanting, like 12-plus stories, like 150-plus rooms, and it was just do nothing for the village. It would just ruin the aesthetic value of the heights. So that's when we really had to sit back and reassess the value of looking at different hotel operators, and that's why we came up with Columbia, because they're in that small boutique lifestyle hotel, and that's when they kind of came to us saying that you should probably be under five stories for sure.
So where's the parking gonna be at?
Right behind with all that spot, all that land that we own, that's,
Okay, you're not gonna put a parking deck in there, right? Or-
no.
Okay.
Do you want one?
No, I honestly, I don't. 'Cause
No.
That just creates more.
No, exactly. You know I bought the church behind there too, correct?
Oh, no, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so that's, my goal is to put employees and also employees that are on Prospect that have different businesses for their employees to park back there too.
Okay.
So,
Oh, good, no, I didn't hear that part.
yeah.
Yeah, you got further back.
Mhm,
Okay, 'cause I was
correct.
trying to figure out where's the parking gonna be at with that church being there, but, okay, so that makes sense. No. Anybody else have any questions on that?
I have some. Wait, so what is gonna be in the existing structure right now?
So the existing structure on the left side would probably most likely be the restaurant.
Okay.
And the other side might be a spa/bar on the first level. And then we got a lower level, which will have like conference rooms and maybe also smaller commercial space for lease.
Okay, and so then will the hotel connect to that? Or-
Yes.
Or you have?
That'll be all one fluid.
Okay.
So you'll be able to see the end of the, you'll be able to visually look at Prospect and look through the atrium to the very back into the park in the back.
Okay.
So you're going across the alley, right?
Yes, ma'am. Or actually building on the alley.
You're building on the alley.
Yep.
Is there a lot of trucks that go through the alley for deliveries?
No.
Is there anything going?
They actually
through
come up Cyberlane to go to Joe's, but other than that, that's it. Maybe UPS every once in a while.
Okay.
And then we knocked down that fence, that barrier. Remember that barrier fence
Yeah.
that was so impeding? So I removed that so that the traffic can flow much easier through there.
Okay, I'll have to go drive through there.
Yeah, definitely.
All right,
Anyone else? Trustee Weisenberg, do you have?
exciting.
Just some miscellaneous questions. Was there supposed to be like some, within the atrium there, like green space within the hotel? Wasn't that originally, or am I just dreaming?
Well, the green space will be out front as far as, planter boxes, things that nature, trees. In the back, our hope is, from the recommendation from Columbia, is to have like an herb garden of some sort. In the parking, there will be also different various landscaping vegetation in those areas too.
Yeah, when you walk in from Prospect, isn't it open right now?
Yeah.
Yes, yeah, it is.
Will it remain open?
No, there'll be a roof over that, yes.
Okay.
I think at one time something was said that the tree that's standing there would remain.
That's what I thought.
That's, I remember
Okay.
it vaguely.
Yeah.
that
So it
wasn't
Either you
even-
look through to trees or you
Yeah.
look into it.
We'll have trees inside too, because unfortunately all those ash trees are dying. I don't know if you looked at them,
Yeah.
we had a specialist come out and look at them, unfortunately.
Anyone else? And just incidentally, we're excited about that, but there'll be a lot of people, tradespeople working on that project here, spending money while it's being built, so that's exciting too.
Yes, lots.
Mayor, if I could, just so nobody is surprised, one of the issues that came up last night, and by the way, it was a great presentation last night. They came to the zoning board meeting 2 weeks prior, so, gave a good introduction, so the meeting was very productive last night. Everybody had was introduced to it. I think without exception, every vote went 8-0. I mean, they were all unanimous. There is one issue that I'm going to have to address. It's not a big deal, but just so everybody understands, there'll be another agreement coming, and that is if you're familiar with the property on Duryea, there's a wall that sort of, it's not a retaining wall, but it's a wall that kind of sticks out that helps offset the grade. That is actually on village right-of-way, and we can't find any evidence that there's ever any agreement for them to occupy that space. So we're going to make that, an agreement. So we'll put that of record. The other thing is, as you get back down Duryea to where the tower section is of the hotel, there's going to be a balcony section that sticks out over the property line into the right-of-way by like 2.5 feet. It's not a big deal. It's only over the sidewalk. It's not like into the street where you got to worry about. But again, it's something that with one license agreement to use the right-of-way for that design. That wall that I was talking about, it will be extended farther down the block. But again, it's just to help offset the grade because there will be windows below the sidewalk level so that they can get light in. It's going to wind up being a wall. The sidewalk will be maintained at least 5 feet wide the whole length, so we're not losing, the walkability and everything else. But it is in the right-of-way, so we do need the board to consent to that. So just so everybody knows, that'll be coming.
So the balcony, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
The balconies that are in the right-of-way are like above head?
They're, I was gonna say, the height.
Yeah, they're actually 12 feet above the sidewalk.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
that's like we have air rights to that.
Technically, yeah, the right-of-way line, it's not just below your feet, it's,
Okay.
above your head.
Okay.
And, so it sticks out a little bit. 2.5 feet.
But it's 12 feet high, so I'm just thinking,
Right.
like, it's 12 feet high, I think it's okay.
If I didn't say anything, I don't think anybody would ever have noticed or thought about it, but it is something that's important to.
It's kind of like when you're walking down Prospect, you're walking underneath the canvas,
Sure.
but you don't really realize you are. I mean, that's kind of same scenario, but they'll be 12 feet high where those are probably like 7 to 8
And
feet.
it's, when we did the overlay district plan, we actually encouraged canopies.
Right.
And so they were, do we treat this as a canopy? It's not really a canopy, it's permanent, it's part of the building. So it's not anything that's out of the ordinary, it's not an unusual request, but it is something I think we need to document so that in the future, everybody is clear.
So in the overlay district, did we require canopies?
No, but we allowed canopies to stick out over the right-of-way.
Okay.
Normally, the property owner can't build anything onto their building that hangs out over into the village right-of-way.
But we did have a glass requirement, right?
We did, and that was one of the
That is
variances.
coming next.
Oh, sorry.
That was
Well,
brought
no,
up.
I was just saying, I have a question about that too.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, and that's one of the next discussion items. It surprises me because there's a
Let's
tremendous
get into that
amount
then.
of glass.
Might as well get into that, so.
Yeah, exactly, but there's a lot of glass on this building. So is your variance request asking for more? I mean, how could that?
No, that
Believe it or
more.
not, it's less
Yeah.
because of the amount of, well, go ahead, you can
Okay.
explain it probably better than me.
Well, what you have now, pre-existing, is the requirement meets at maybe 2.5%
Okay,
of your, of what you're asking with what's there now. And so we're going to increase that by over 40% with windows. And you got to keep in mind, we're working at elevation, so when you're on that prospect on the sidewalk there, if you were at knee high, you're actually in the basement of the building, and above that is the first floor. So that's where a lot of the windows are going to be, on that first floor wrapping around.
okay.
How,
Sorry to interrupt you, trustee DeBoer, go ahead. if you had
no,
a
I
question.
just was trying, I couldn't remember what is how much are you off of the zoning?
We required in the overlay district plan 75% glazing, and they're at 50%. But to look at it, you would think that they were at 90%.
I know, it
Yeah,
looks like it's
so
so
I think
much,
it's
so
just-
I'm so shocked.
Yeah.
And actually
So
structurally,
they comply
Is it
with the
because-
spirit, but not technically the letter.
Yeah.
Is it because that first entrance is so tall and it's not all of that counts? I mean, is that
Yeah.
why it's like
Yeah.
that?
yeah, and plus structurally it cannot support windows.
I get that.
Yeah, that's why we
Okay.
can't do that
Okay.
all window.
I'm sorry, I'm done.
No, all good questions, and we've delved into the next, just for the record, let me read the variance so everyone at home knows what the second order of business, which is a variance application filed by KDB Group LLC and Atrium Hotel LLC seeking variances for building height, storefront glass requirements, decks and wall that project onto the village right-of-way, and sidewalk width for development of a hotel on the property located at 4615 North Prospect Road.
And if you'd like, I could run through these since I was there last night, just real quick.
Sure,
Just
yes,
tick
I
them
think we
off. The building height, again, from Duryea, they're not exceeding the building height, but because of the change in grade, if you measured the tower section where the hotel rooms are from Prospect at grade, it's about 2 feet. So to me, it was so de minimis, they really didn't need a variance, but the zoning board didn't have any problem with it. It's one of those things, again, nobody would ever have known. The storefront glass, we already covered. The decks and wall that project onto village right-of-way, we covered. Sidewalk width on the Prospect, there's going to be, because again of the pretty steep change in grade on Prospect in front of that building, they've got the sidewalk up at the road that will be 5 feet wide and unobstructed, and then planter boxes.
Correct.
And then to have it level, it'll be what, 9 feet wide?
Correct.
Up against the building.
Building.
And that is where you'll have some dining probably.
Exactly, on the left side where the restaurant is, we'll have some open-air dining, but not on the ground floor, it'll be raised up. And then to the right of...
Starts at grade on Duryea, and then because it goes level, the grade goes down. So as you get closer to, farther south, there's going to be steps to get down off of that. But, again, you can see from the design.
That requires a variance?
Well, the overlay plan required 15 feet of sidewalk, and this would be 9 plus 5 is 14, and then there's about 1.5 feet or 2 feet of planters that they thought they should ask for a variance.
Okay.
Again, I think you could interpret it in such a way that we didn't need a variance, but.
I'm sorry, I just can't remember all those off the top of my head.
And the variances are ZBA only. The board, our village board here does not handle those unless a variance is denied and the applicant asks for an appeal to the village board. But this is just really to keep the whole project sort of together so the board understands all of the aspects.
And they approved all of these variances?
Yes, without exception.
Okay.
Anyone else? If you do have questions that occur to you after the meeting tonight, filter them to Dustin, or you can always call Greg directly, however you want to do that, but they're always good about getting information to us. So we'll move on to the next item, and that is also a discussion item, an amended lease agreement between the Village of Peoria Heights and the KDB Group LLC. Trustee Kazam?
So we all approved the site plan last week for the popcorn candy store in the pump house, the reconceived pump house, and this is coming back to us because the previous lease that KDB had on this property was a completely different concept for a bar and restaurant idea. So it's in front of us now to create a new lease for this new business proposal and plan, and I'll let council weigh in on this.
We talked about this quite a bit actually last week, and based on the discussions, I went ahead and redrew the lease to fit with this current use and to fit the parameters of where I thought the board was going. It's really only for discussion. We needed something in writing to see and discuss, and then if we need to make additional changes to it, we'll do so before final approval. If you think it's a worthwhile exercise, Mayor, I could go through briefly the changes.
Yeah, why don't you walk us through this,
That's
especially
great.
any changes?
Yeah.
Highlight them.
So, again, as Trustee Kazam said, so much has changed since the original lease was drawn up. Plus, there were the issues with respect to the, is it a purchase option, right of first refusal, all of that was never really finalized. So we need to use this opportunity. I think it's a good opportunity to clean up all of those lingering questions about the lease. So on the first page, you'll notice it's now called an amended lease agreement. We're even more clearly defining which portion of the property they have so that it slices off the Centennial Building at a, reasonable division line. And notably on the first page, I'm saying, and I think this is important, that this is, a new lease. This is intended to replace the current lease that's in effect. The current lease is revoked, and based on where I thought the board was going last week, I'm saying in here that any defaults under the prior lease agreement are waived by both parties. Because there was the issue of rent payments during calendar year 2019. If you flip to the second page, you'll see that the commencement date of the lease is changed to reflect the actual rent commencement, which was January of 2020, so January of this year. But I kept the term of the lease going, and actually I filled those in. I probably should have had redlined that. On the first page in 2.1, we're calling the term because near as we can tell, it was January 23rd or 24th when the lease was signed of 2019. So we're calling the term February 1 of 2019 through January 31 of 2029. That gets us to that rent bump quicker, is my logic behind that. Rent commencement was January 2020. If you go forward to page 4, and this is a very important point, KDB Group remains the tenant under the lease, even though Popcorn Works, which is its own business entity, is going to be a subtenant. We're not striking the lease with KDB and entering a new lease with Popcorn Works. We're approving Popcorn Works as a subtenant, and the original lease required approval of any sublease. So this just actually comes out and says it, that we approve the sublease to Popcorn Works, but as between the village and KDB, KDB is responsible for all of the obligations under the lease, including rent.
So back on page 2 then.
Oh, okay.
Under the real estate taxes, I did notice that property is exempt. So
It is
does it need to be
until it starts to be used. It hasn't yet, but once it starts to be used for a non-exempt purpose, and a for-profit business would be a non-exempt purpose, then the assessor can assess it, and the tenant will be responsible for property tax.
So that doesn't require like an appraisal or anything? It's
No.
just the tax assessor?
The assessor will do an assessment, and if
And the tax status is based on use, not ownership, correct?
Correct. So exempt charities, public bodies that own property that they lease to a business that's engaged in a for-profit enterprise, you pay real estate tax on that. So there will eventually be real estate taxes. Everybody knows it's all in arrears. So, by the time it gets assessed, it'll be 2022 before we would see any revenue from that. But on a going forward basis, then every year we would see tax revenue. That takes us to page 5, section 11.1. Originally, we had the lease saying that, we know that the tenant is going to be making modifications to the building, and the landlord has approval rights over those modifications, so we wanted to, again, retain control over the building. Now that we've had the plans, we've seen the plans, we've approved the plans as far as that whole site plan, there's no reason not to come out and say, as long as they stick to what they submitted to us and we approved, they can proceed. And again, I think it was important that they were, doing everything they could to preserve the historical integrity of the building, which was really, I think, one of our fundamental goals. So that issue is addressed. If you keep going to page 7 and 8, at the bottom of 7, section 13.8, that addresses the use. So we've got a use limitation, so the tenant can only use this property, these buildings, for a retail popcorn and candy store. And then those stipulations that we talked about. They can have parties at the property, but they're limited in their business hours, 8 p.m. on Sunday through Thursday, 9 p.m. on Friday and Saturday. But they can stay open until the end of any special event in Tower Park. And then last is on page 8. This, I'm doing my best to try to incorporate all of the discussions that occurred at that January 22, 2019 meeting, where I was tasked to come up with a purchase option, but the discussions really were more along the line of a right of first refusal. I've put both in here, and just so everybody can see what a purchase option looks like. Personally, I think the village should maintain control of the property as long as we can, but the purchase option language is, just standard for any commercial lease. We usually have, if the tenant wants to buy the property, they get an appraisal. We, as landlord, the village, looks at that appraisal and says, yeah, that's fair, or nah, we better get another appraisal. If we want a second appraisal, we pay for it. If the difference between the two appraisals is 5% or less, we just split the difference, and the tenant buys it for in between those two appraisals. If it's more than 5%, those two appraisers pick a third appraiser who chooses one or the other. So that, again, that's pretty standard fare for a purchase option, and then the purchase would be standard, terms for a commercial purchase. I did add a site plan. Again, it's just taken from the GIS with my fancy hand-drawn boundaries, but, again, it's really intended to show that the Centennial Building is not part of this lease, or any of that park area, what I would call the park area on the east side of the property. If there is a sale, it would be subject to the tenant getting a survey that divided that formally, better than my hand-drawn Sharpie. It would be an actual survey by a surveyor. So that's, like I say, for discussion, this is, we just needed something to see and sink our teeth into. I would expect at the meeting, discussion about which, if any of these added terms we don't want, which ones we do want, anything that isn't in here that should be in here, it's all open. This is just my effort to sort of square the lease with what we were discussing last week.
Good job on that. So I'm sure there'll be lots of questions. Who wants to start?
I have a question about the leasee. So are we being requested to reduce the rent, the monthly rent, or no? Yeah.
Well, they requested, but I don't think that we ever agreed to that.
Okay, so that's on, are you requesting that, Greg?
Yes, I am,
Okay.
yes.
And to what number are you thinking?
Well, the project is well over $250,000 for the build out of this, and for us to recoup our investment in it, it's going to take 27 years at $1,500. If you reduce it down to from $2,500 down to from $2,500 down to $1,500, it's going to take 27 years for us to get our costs back out of that project, and that's not even doing a markup with Pete. If we do it at $1,000 for the lease, our return on that is, I think, 18 years. So we're taking a huge risk, putting all of our money on this project to do the right thing for the community. We've heard loud and clear what they don't want. This is the most feasible project that I can think of that could go in that space. And if the popcorn space doesn't work, really nothing will work, and then.
I don't disagree with you, I just wanted to know. So
Yeah.
You're asking for 1,000 or you're asking for less than that?
I would ask, if at all possible, it'd be great to have it for less, since we're doing improvements of a lease. Well, I'll be quite frankly with you, we're at $330,000 for improvements on that property.
Okay. So you want us to consider a number?
Yes,
You have
below
a number in
1,000. Well,
I mean, I can see, I think it's very clear that this is a goodwill project.
It is.
You are never going to make $1 on this
No.
business. KDB Group is never making money on this.
No, not at all. I'll be long in the ground before.
Not in our lifetime.
Yeah, exactly. So it is 100% goodwill to do the right thing in that part of town.
Greg, if we did reduce it to 500, how long till you recoup the money you spent on it?
On that, it's going to probably be like around maybe 14 to 15 years. From 1,000, it was like 17 years. So don't quote me as far as being accurate, but it's still going to be a long time.
Okay.
So You good? But you're only leasing the building for 10 years.
Right, with 4 or 5-year extensions.
Okay. So I assume you intend to extend it after the 10 years?
If Pete's doing well, yes. No pressure, Pete. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
But, not only, we're also going to try to help Pete in different venues. We'll probably stock his popcorn there at the Atrium, at San Cody Lodge, so at the Scottish Rite. So I think with our synergies that we have, we can definitely help him on that. So, but it's still, it's a risk. It is what it is, unfortunately.
Should we, with this new lease that we're coming up with, shouldn't we incorporate the request for the reduced? There's no point in signing a lease now
And then reducing.
and then turning around in a month and having to do this all over again.
No, that's a good point.
Yeah, just to be clear, I left the rent the way it was originally because that is not something we talked about last week, but I expected that this discussion would come up. So just like I said, nothing in here is not subject to change.
So, technically, right now, I can't pass that on to Pete. I can't pay $2,500 plus another $2,000 to him where he's paying $4,500 a month. Just financially doesn't make sense for Pete. So that's why I'm willing to take the risk on our end to do the build out at, over $300,000, but try to get Pete into the place and get him on his feet, get it going. And
Greg, if all things went really well and really smoothly, what would be the earliest Pete could be in business?
August, September. Probably mid to late September, if not sooner.
Wow.
This summer?
Yeah, I've already got people lined up, ready to go.
Well, then I'd like to, I understand your point, Trustee Weisenberg, but I would challenge everybody, let's get this done in a week if we could filter.
We could come on an agreement on rent today, and we could vote on this lease and the rent reduction all at once at our board meeting, then it would be fine, correct?
So I think I speak for all of the board, maybe. When I say we want this to succeed, I think everyone likes the idea. But so if you had to make a request, what would it be?
Well, I'd love to have 0. But I guess keep in mind that just keep in mind you're getting an asset back that's worth $350 with my improvements.
Right.
And they're not frivolous improvements. They're AC, plumbing, electrical, a lot of electrical. So the whole place will be air conditioned and heated both. And there'll be, go ahead.
I think plus I think what we need to take into consideration is, and I'm not, just so we all understand, we'll have increased property value, and that money will be coming back to the Heights, being paid for by you,
Correct.
me. And then we have the benefit of the sales tax revenue from the new enterprise, so.
Correct.
I
And
just wanted
then,
to throw that out there, so.
And that's a
my
good
fellow
point, so
trustees-
I don't mean to interrupt, but Stephanie, could you in a few days run a pro forma of what, based on the business plan for the popcorn shop and sales, and also what that might, work with Lori Epkins, what that might generate in property taxes for the bodies along with sales tax? Is that a doable?
That is not a doable, no.
Come
I can take a look
can
at
do
it and
it.
see what I can give you an idea of, but that's,
But the assessor ought to be able to tell us roughly what that
Yes.
property is going to be
yes,
appraised at,
yes.
which is going to be a win for the school district.
Yeah.
That's going to be,
Right. So
That's gonna be a property
throw a
going-
number.
throw a number,
What were you wanting?
$250.
$250?
Yeah.
so,
And I'll put a caveat to that. I'll sell that lot that we have to Mr. Smoji.
Wait, which lot? Oh, the parking lot.
he
Okay, I thought you
he
meant the
wants that
Centennial.
Well, he doesn't want me to develop it or do anything on it, so I'm willing to extend out a carrot to,
Any resident, Derek or any residential? Development.
exactly. I just figured Mr. Smoji was the one who was most vocal and didn't want anything going there, so I figured I'd offer it to him
We
first.
love new houses.
Dave Williams looks like.
Yeah, we love
Yes.
new houses. We love new houses, that's for sure.
So is the $330,000, does that include the money that you've already spent on the Centennial Building?
No.
So
I've spent
that's
60
another $65,000 on the Centennial Building.
Actually, it's 68, I asked.
68 you looked
Yeah.
at. Okay, so now we're looking closer to $400,000 you put into a property that we would have never put that kind of money into.
that's
Right.
worth,
So we would have never been able to put that kind of money into those buildings. We would have never been able to make the neighborhood look that nice. We would never be getting real estate taxes off that, and we would never be getting sales taxes if it weren't for the KPD group.
Correct.
Well said, trustee DeVore, thank you.
Thank you.
I tried to say that at the last meeting, but didn't say it very well.
So I'm on board with the 250.
So am I.
Counsel, could you, I'm sure you can craft a lease that leaves the rent at $2,500, but as long as this is a tenant, as long as popcorn shops, is that something agreeable to you, Greg?
Yeah, that is. Because, really our first intention, Kim loved that place because of the 1930s architect, and at that time, we were thinking of actually bringing Craig Miller from Bozeman up here, our architect, to reside out of there. And he didn't want to move from Bozeman, unfortunately. So then it just sat empty, and then that's when all the thoughts of, a restaurant, a little bar, and, that's how all that came about. So, but yeah, I would have no problem going back to our original 25 if we can't make the place into the Popcorn Works for Pete.
What would be the benefit of that? I'm just asking. Because if you've already said that you're not going to put a bar in there.
Correct.
Because the neighbors don't want it. So if we hold him to a lease of $2,500, but he can't get a business to work in there, realistically, if Pete doesn't work, they're losing $400,000 and walking away. Am I wrong?
Correct.
So is it worth holding him to that? I don't know, maybe I'm looking at it wrong.
No, I understand. I agree with you on that. I think we could go with the 250.
Oh, yeah.
Let's take care of this. They've been taking care of the high splits.
Go ahead, Frank.
Back and forth to each other, so.
In the new agreement, and I don't know, this may be a little out of line, but I don't know. I'm new at all this, but on the previous lease, there was a default for 2019 where the rent wasn't paid, even though the lease was signed.
You could be correct. I know that because it was in our attorney's hands for quite some time.
Right.
Because eventually we were wanting to purchase the property, then that did not go through. Then we were going to lease it.
Okay.
So in front of us also is a decision to either forgive that rent. I'm
Right.
looking toward council because I want to be, you to correct me if I'm wrong.
Absolutely, and I, to be clear, just for the sake of discussion, I put in on the very first page that all of those defaults are waived.
Right.
And by waiver, I mean, we can't go after that money.
I have another question for you, counsel. So, being in this business, not any longer, but in the past, a good attorney could probably get this particular client out of those responsibilities. What is your opinion on that? I'm not saying that any of us wants to do that. I think that this is all discussion and, I'm just.
There are certainly arguments about, is it a binding lease in the absence of the lease conforming to what was approved by the village? I think those would be arguments that the citizens of the village would make in attacking the lease, not the tenant who signed the lease. What I think would be our exposure is all of the money that KDB Group spent in reliance on the validity and continued ability to occupy the property, with no expectation, that we were going to ever pay that back, and that far exceeded what the rent would have been. $68,000 is 2 years and 3 months of rent.
Okay. I just wanted to ask that question.
Right.
So what's the best, we need to get them going and get money generated. So our best bet is do what Trustee DeVore was talking about with the 250, and let's get this all taken care of so we can vote on that next Tuesday, the lease.
2 weeks.
2 weeks?
Yeah, it would be July 7, right?
I would agree with that. That was a little lower than I thought you were going to say, but I agree with it.
I'm just, I'm just thinking of Pete,
Yeah,
it's just.
no, I agree. And you know what, it's more beneficial to our community, in my view, to have this for the neighbors and residents and bring in sales tax and increase property value and everything like that.
Right, because it's been sitting empty. I haven't, done anything with it except wait for that perfect opportunity.
Everybody I showed the pictures to are excited.
How about
Can't wait, so.
That's good.
If we do this, Trustee Kazam, you're the point person, we'll use you and Dustin and council to filter questions through and to work through this.
Sure.
With the goal of approving it. If we have a document and you're still not ready for it in 2 weeks, it can always be deferred. But let's set the goal of trying to approve this in 2 weeks. We can have a conversation, but council, will you make everyone individually aware of any questions that may be filtered to you and give the answer to everyone?
I will. I
Okay?
absolutely will.
Does that make sense?
One of the key points that I really need direction on is the concept of the purchase option. Do we really want to sell this property even at its appraised value?
Can I interject? We don't want it, because the fact is, if we take ownership of it and the popcorn place doesn't work, no one's going to vote on anything
So you're
else.
not interested in buying?
No, and I think it'd have to go out to general public too for purchase. They just can't be just directly to us. So I
That
think,
was the other thing I was going to say. If we're going to add a purchase option in here, there's a lot of other statutory compliance that we have to do that would delay things. It's not impossible, but it would delay things.
So you no longer want to buy it?
I'm afraid the community will tie our hands as far as we try to bring anything to the board to look at besides a popcorn place. And it'd be foolish for me to spend Kim's money that way.
I have a couple more things.
I do, yeah, okay, go ahead.
Number one, it says in here that Pete can remain open as long as there is an event. He can stay open till the end of the event. But what if he wants to have an event? So how does that work? So like
Then
he
he's
decides that
got-
he's gonna have a 1-year anniversary party. He has to close at 7 o'clock or whatever.
8 o'clock on weeknights, 9 o'clock on Friday
What
and
if he wants to
Saturday.
throw a block party? So then he has to come to the board and ask for permission.
It's
How's
not at
this
the
gonna
tower.
work? What?
It's not at the tower.
So
Does it stay
events
at the tower?
only count at the tower?
That
So-
was an accommodation to the neighbors, and I don't think it was an unreasonable
I'm just asking.
accommodation, right? But no, the way it's drafted and the way it was approved, because that's a condition of the site plan approval,
Okay.
so we can't really change that. Doesn't matter what the lease
Okay, so if he wanted
says.
to have an event, he would have to come to the board, ask to have the event at Tower Park and then his building could be included? I mean, you see where I'm going? Like, so everybody else can have an event or use Tower Park, but Pete can't?
Well, of course, Pete
I
can
don't
use
mean,
Tower
I don't
Park.
mean that to be like
No, you're right.
argumentative, but I'm.
No, he can absolutely use Tower Park.
Probably be an enforcement issue.
If the question is, can he decide to have an event at his business in the Popcorn Works when there's no event in Tower Park and stay open later than the hours that were stipulated by the ZBA when they granted the approval, conditioned on those hours? I would say no.
What if,
He can't come to us and ask to ever do it.
Yeah, I want to stay open till midnight.
Just one day, like, or like 10 o'clock, one day, he can't.
Couldn't we put that in the agreement, the lease agreement? I mean, I know what
I
ZBA
did.
said, but we are the village board, and if we want to say, that he
I
comes and
understand.
asks, and upon board approval, one time,
I understand, but the zoning board approved the site plan and some variances,
Okay, so it's a
chief
no.
of which is parking, only on the condition that the hours be reasonable. And it had to do with the traffic and the, cars in the neighborhood and all of that. So that was something the ZBA unanimously agreed as a concession to the neighbors that didn't want this at all. I mean, they were saying no.
I mean, not all the neighbors.
Some
Not all,
neighbors,
no, but-
local neighbors.
Some of them, yeah.
what if Pete hosted the event at Tower Park?
Yeah, he could do that,
And
absolutely.
then,
And
and then
then-
his business could stay
By
open.
extension,
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay,
You
sorry.
got all that, Pete?
Okay,
that little,
sorry.
No,
I
that's a whole different animal, so.
Okay, then my one, so as far as the rent goes, if we're agreeing to do it at $250, at what, I mean, I feel like there has to be terms on the extension, like,
I agree.
if, like, okay, so for 10 years, we'll let you have it at $250,000, which means we'll only collect $60,000 in rent, right, is what we figured out? But then you've made your money back, the popcorn stand's doing awesome, it's bringing in $10,000 a month, whatever, then rent needs to go up. So how do we work that in there?
You tell me.
Oh, you're good.
I'm not sure even at 10 years though. I get what you're saying, but I'm not even sure at 10 years they'd be even yet.
Well,
Oh, no, it won't be.
It has to go to 2,500, but
Right.
it could go from 250 to 500, from 500 to
I think it makes
750.
sense to go to 500 after 10 years.
Yeah, and then the next 5 would be like 1,000, I think.
Well, we could base that on sales possibly.
Yeah.
That's,
Yeah, why don't-
based
why don't-
on sales.
yeah,
I
why
think
don't
a
we have
percentage
sales?
over sales.
Why don't we have a percentage of sales on top of the 500
Yeah.
after that? Yeah, I'll do that.
That, Greg, that agreeable?
To me, I'm fine, but it's more on Pete because you're letting loose his financials.
Right.
And so I don't know how Pete feels about that.
It's kind of tough. I kind of like the, sorry, so, hear me.
you know, I think it's based on the performance of the business, how we view, and we're looking at every 5 years, right? You know, evaluate it at 5 years to see if we're struggling, if it's a hit, and where we're at for paying back the KDB group for the renovations. Kind of cross that bridge when we get to it, so to speak.
And, you know, just to be clear, even though we put fixed dollars in for the, you know, extension terms, what the rent is, that doesn't mean if the tenant says, look, I can extend this lease, but I can't extend it at $1,000 a month. It's going to have to be $750. We're right back here 10 years from now. It's probably not us. It'll be a whole different group of people back here 10 years from now saying, come on, do we want to make them go because they want to pay $750 instead of $1,000? So I sort of like fixed numbers that can be renegotiated based on performance. And, you know, a percentage of the sales is common with commercial leases, but we're going to know how well he's doing. We will know. If he's thriving, we're going to know it.
Could we put that after 10 years, there needs to be a lease negotiation for rental increase or something? Like, can we?
You can, we can say, I always tell my clients, don't do it, but you can always say, you know, to be negotiated for the extension. Yeah.
Instead of putting a set dollar amount?
Yep. So after 10 years, they get a 5-year extension at negotiated rent.
I mean, I feel like 10 years of rent at $250 is very generous. Like, I mean, you might choke if I told you what my business pays in month of rent. So I feel like that making it $500 after 10 years is still fairly fair.
I don't disagree with that.
No,
I just need direction. I don't want to inject myself into the
So are we
negotiation, but.
all okay with the 250? I know pretty much everyone said yeah down here. But I did. Trustee Carter, Kazam, what are your thoughts on the 250 and then the 500 at 10 years?
Yes, I am okay with that.
Yeah, I'm
With
fine with
Mr.
that.
Clarno, yeah, field.
And then negotiated?
Yeah.
Yep.
So for 15 years, we have it fixed. 10 years at 250, 5 years at 500, and then.
I mean, really, I hope you're
Our
open that long.
predecessor.
Yeah. And just for
here.
And I'm gonna need you to be open by December so that I can give my clients popcorn for Christmas.
there you go.
So
And just
you got a month.
and just so everyone at home, and maybe for my clarification as well, the initial $2,500 was kind of set around a restaurant bar.
Correct.
And a
Right.
liquor license.
And a liquor
but
license.
possibility, which I really think is where
So
you get
the popcorn
money.
and candy is kind of a different beast.
Yeah,
So it's not really realistic.
no.
$2,500, that's a lot of popcorn.
I have another question,
Well, they got
counsel.
tappy too. so
Under
they got
11.1, tenant shall comply with all laws and ordinances regarding improvements of public-owned property. Does that mean that that is exclusively union labor or prevailing wage, or what does that mean?
Yes, yes, and doesn't it say that?
It says at the bottom, union contractors for all improvements.
Yeah,
Is that legal?
and we have talked about that, and I don't know where we're at on that.
So non-union is coming in at $280,000. Union is coming in at $335,000.
But if he's not taking any public,
Yeah, we're not taking any TIF or any, no,
Right.
you're right.
so he doesn't really have any requirements,
No.
does he? From what I understand? Because we passed the prevailing wage ordinance, but that was just for public projects.
It was for, if they took government assistance.
Right. Which you guys
We
aren't.
don't want no rat there.
You're gonna get the big rat.
We don't want the rat there.
They've done away with the rat. It's illegal to use a rat now
I'm gonna miss him.
in the state of Illinois.
Are you
Seriously?
serious?
Dead serious.
I don't think so. I just got off the phone with another municipality that has a rat.
Have them call me.
Across from City Hall.
Do we use, no matter what, every person we hire for a municipal building, we use union contractors as it stands right now?
Or
Yes, we
prevailing
have
wage.
to. Well, we don't have to use
Well,
union, we have
let
to
me-
pay prevailing wage.
Okay, but that's different.
It is.
It's a responsible bidder ordinance that it's not necessarily union. It requires that contractor to have an apprenticeship recognized by the Department of Labor. That could be achieved by a non-union company.
Correct.
It's rare, but it could.
So
I
can
just
we
wanted to
change
clarify
the
that.
wording from union to responsible bidder
Again,
contractors?
I take
I'm-
direction from you. That
Why
is a
are-
I'm not
board
suggesting
decision.
we need to change it if that's what that means.
Okay, okay.
If that's what it means. Is
Well,
that
on the
what-
last
It
line, it
is.
says union contractors for all improvements.
But
Oh, I
why,
didn't see that.
So does that mean the gardener has to be union? Does that mean everybody has to be?
No, for improvements, not maintenance.
Well, I mean,
gardener
they could
would
be
be maintenance.
improving the yard. Is that considered?
Well,
That's
the entire
maintenance.
project
Mowing the yard is
improvement.
maintenance, planting a tree is landscaping that would arguably.
Okay, okay.
why would we put any restrictions on it? We're not the ones doing the work. It's not even public dollars.
I think as long as they comply with the Responsible Bidder Act, that's all in my opinion, that's what we need.
Yeah,
I
they just-
agree
they
with
just
that,
need to be-
responsible bidder.
Yeah, can you change that?
Yeah, I can.
Yeah, because as long as they're not taking any public money, there's really no reason to tie their hands with.
Responsible bidder only.
To comply with responsible bidder
Yeah.
ordinance.
Got it.
I'm done with all my questions. I'm sorry. I feel like I've been monopolizing this.
Sorry.
Okay. Are there any more questions on that?
Thank you all, and again, please, work with Dustin and through Trustee Kazam to Mark Walton and with the KDB group, but thank you all for getting us through this tonight. Anything else under economic development, Trustee Kazam?
No, that's it.
I think
Thank
that's
you,
enough
Mayor.
for one night.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. All right, on to fire. Trustee
Your turn.
Weisenberg, discussion of the Peoria Heights Fire Department.
All right, so this is really just an update. I'm sure we're all familiar or all aware of that Chief Walters is retiring in November. Prior to COVID-19, we started to plan what that was going to look like. COVID-19 delayed our planning, but it has not delayed his retirement plans. So he is still planning on retiring in November. So just a quick update. We had three ideas that the board floated around was a duty crew with a paid part-time fire chief, a outsourcing to Peoria, which we've had some discussions with Peoria. We haven't gotten that information back from them yet. And also a third option, which we haven't really talked about much, but forming a fire protection district. So I just wanted you guys to know that November's coming quickly.
What was number 3 again?
Possibly forming a fire protection district to, I assume, fund a fire department.
Oh,
Can you explain that?
So to fund fire departments, what some municipalities do is form a district which raises additional tax revenue to fund a fire department.
It comes with another line item on your real estate tax bill.
Right.
That would be more of a mechanism to fund, right?
Right, fund. And most likely.
But
would be a ballot.
that fire department, a fire protection district fire department would be governed by a board of elected
Right.
commissioners.
Yeah, and I don't think that's the most desirable option, but it's out there.
is there any around here?
Dunlap? Bart,
There's
yeah.
190 in the state.
Yeah.
What information do you need, Trustee Weisenberg?
Really, what we're waiting for right now, Greg and his recommendation, Chief Walters and his recommendation has not changed. So we got all the information we need. The numbers may change a little bit, but we've got all the information that he submitted for the duty crew and the part-time chief. He's even made a recommendation for the chief. What we're waiting for is the information from Peoria. And
This is going to be a paid duty crew? Is that what you're saying?
That was one of the ideas that was floated.
Just in like for first shift?
Yeah, it would be, they would cover, I believe it's 10-hour shifts. They would cover the daytime, and then the volunteer crew would cover the after hours. And then the part-time fire chief would manage that whole ordeal.
If we did a duty crew, would we have to pay to send them to the fire academy?
I think if we get to that point, I think the qualifications will be totally different, obviously, but yeah, I'm not sure what level of training Trustee DeVore, but I do know that it would be something that obviously an applicant would apply, and the set of state qualifications would be much different than obviously what we have now. Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted everyone to be aware of where we were. because November's going to come quick.
Yeah.
I mean, technically, we could, if we hired a new fire chief, we could leave things as they are,
That's also an option.
ish. I mean, I know it needs some work, but like,
Yeah, well-
if we had you know, when Chief Walters retires, if we had a new fire chief and like, I don't know, we had like part of strategic planning for the fire department, we could kind of keep the same situation.
Right. I think one of the difficulties is the daytime availability. As we all know now, it's mostly, if not all, Chief Walters responding during the day. So finding a part-time fire chief with availability during the day, I think is one of the great unknowns, if we'd even be able to find that. I don't know.
I mean, really, like, just to keep, I mean, obviously, we have a lot to think about and discuss, but like, what is the process for us looking for a new fire chief right now, right? Because couldn't we be killing two birds with one stone, like possibly interviewing fire chiefs and getting our information from Peoria and all these, you know, duty crew numbers and figuring out all this at the same time, so then we have all the facts in front of us and we could choose which way we wanted to go?
Does the board even do that? Because I don't remember voting on any fire chief since I've been on the board. It's the fire department volunteers that vote who wants to be the chief, isn't it?
That is
does that work?
unknown. I've been told two different things.
Yeah,
I was told I don't, or we don't.
I think that depends on the administration, to be honest with you. I think that at the end of the day, the mayor does bring a name to the board. Now, they do make a recommendation. I know, but in the past, the last two fire chiefs have been local known commodities that the mayors at that time went on the recommendation. Mayor Carter and then Mayor Allen, you know, they went on the recommendation of the outgoing chief. But to answer your question, Trustee DeVore, we've started all this prior to COVID-19. It put us back to square one. We've started back up again. The easy part of this would be to accept applications and start interviews, but I think if we started that right now, that catching up with the other two options are going to take a little bit longer. But again, that's a board and the mayor's option.
Well, that's a good point, but I think you wouldn't appoint a chief until you knew the options, because the skill set might be different depending on what option you want to exercise versus continuing on versus a duty crew or looking to contract a service. I think the most important question is, and Trustee Weisenberg did a good job laying out the options, but the most important thing is, how are we going to fund any of those options? So,
right. And I also think that I'm not sure of anybody that's going to interview for the position without knowing the job description.
Right.
Because we really don't know if it's going to be, you know, that's a moving target right now. So I think with anybody interviewing we really don't have a job description for them. We don't know what route we're going. But I do think, you know, Chief Walters, I've talked to him, Trustee Weisenberg's talked to him. He's not changing his mind. That's a solid date, and that is when he is done. So, and he is our first shift crew and does an outstanding job. And it is concerning to me that, you know, what are we going to do without him? Because I pull him out of the equation. You know, those percentages are very low as far as response. So, you know, that is something we really need to think hard on. I think if it wasn't for the COVID-19, we would already be sitting here talking about our options, but unfortunately we're not. And I'll continue my discussions, you know, with Peoria, but I know that Chief Walters is also working on his updated numbers, so.
but go ahead.
No, go on. I lost my train of thought.
Well, so, I mean, thank you for getting this conversation started. I need direction from all of you, and the sooner the better. It's my understanding and belief, as I sit here today, that the mayor would make that appointment. I have been personal friends with Greg Walters a long time, and now have a professional relationship with him. And that being said, I have a tremendous amount of respect for him. So the way I would see this working is that, you know, he and I, along with the fire trustee and the administrator, coming up with a pool of names, and we'll see how that would work out. But again, I think we can't do that until the board directs, you know, administration what option you want to exercise.
Right.
So that needs to be needs to come soon. And then again, the funding mechanism, which, you know, prior to COVID, we were hitting on all cylinders here. Revenues were increasing in a lot of ways, And I think it was something that could have been affordable. Now, and I still committed to that, but we have to figure out how it's going to be funded, so.
Yeah, the revenue is definitely a concern, so hopefully when the popcorn and candy shop starts up, all jokes aside, when do we think we'll get those numbers from Peoria so that we can make a decision collectively on which direction we head?
They've had the same problems we've had.
Well, I know, I understand that, but
I would hope I would have some type of decision from them next month.
okay.
Because we've only got till November.
So we're down to like, what, 5 months?
That's not very
We don't want
long.
to wait till November to make this
No,
decision.
because if we decide to go the duty crew, we really want Chief Walters to do a lot of the training and, you know, percepting or whatever of the new fire chief.
So we really got less than 5 months to make a decision.
Yeah,
on
well,
that.
less than 5 months.
However, I think it's possible there could be an interim chief that could continue to fill in and do business the way we're doing it now until we figured everything out. That's a possibility. I don't think we should rule that out. I'd like to hear from you. It doesn't have to be tonight, but I'd like to hear from you your preferred choices, because, you know, I don't get a vote on this. I do get to put the name of chief in nomination, but my preferred option today is figuring out a way to do a duty crew. Not ruling out anything else, but, you know, relying on you to do all that homework for us and get back with us. But again, it's going to come down to how we going to fund it. So.
Popcorn.
Boots.
If we did have that, so I want to be,
sign.
you know, real transparent with all of you. If we did have that, the way I see that working would be that we would advertise, if we knew and we made the decision we're going to have a duty crew, I think we would advertise that position. And that I would probably rely on Chief Sutton and Chief Walters to narrow that pool down to 3 or 4, then, you know, probably you and I, Trustee Weisenberg, and the other 2 would interview the final candidates and try and arrive at a consensus, but relying again heavily on Chief Walters' recommendation and bringing that name to the board.
And if we did do the duty crew, we'd advertise all positions.
Yes.
Yeah,
Well,
that makes sense.
for that would be another part of it all then
Right.
too. So then the administrator and the chief, I would see, I don't think any of us, including myself, need to get involved in who those hires are for the fire department, but then the new chief and the administrator, I would see, would be hiring those folks.
How many do you need on a duty crew?
That would be a whole set of qualifications when we get to that, if we got to that point. Kind of similar to when we revamped the ambulance, going back for the trustees to remember that. That was, a whole new ballgame.
Right. So. Ideally, I get the idea with the interim fire chief, but ideally, I think with Greg's not only knowledge of the heights, but also education, I think the ideal situation would be for him to train the guy that's actually going to take over. But I get we could do the interim, but hopefully, this task seems daunting to get done by November. But
And whereas we need to get it done way before then.
Right.
So again, you and I have a lot of, and Chief Sutton and Chief Walters have a lot of work ahead of us, so, but please share with us your thoughts as we move forward. Anything else, Trustee Weisenberg?
No.
Okay, we would be at miscellaneous business. Any miscellaneous business come for the board?
The only thing I have, just briefly, I just want to bring to the board's attention that we're currently working on a program that would give our residents a $20 credit on their water bill. I just want you to put this on your radar. It'll be up for discussion next board meeting, and it was derived from the Ripple program, which you might have heard throughout the state. Some other municipalities are doing that, just to kind of give back to our residents. So been working on that with staff here. Let's discuss it next board meeting, and let's vote on it in the middle of the month. So just a heads up. That's all I have, Mayor.
Thank you, and thank you for coming up with that. You know, we've spent a lot of time and effort in trying to help our businesses. I just simply said to the administrator, figure out something that we can do, even if it's small, for the residents. So you've come up with this, and it's a start. So Go ahead.
Kind of a miscellaneous question, but with all the federal and state stimulus packages, is there anything that the village government can take advantage of regarding our budget, or, I mean, 'cause we've taken a hit with the sales tax. Are there
Yes.
anything we can take advantage of?
Well, I think there are some federal dollars coming our way. I'm not sure when they're coming our way, but as far as programs, I know that Trustee Kazan and I, Mayor Phelan met last Friday on looking at all of our options. There are a few out there. So yeah, we are working towards that, but there are some federal dollars coming our way. I wish I had a time frame, but I'm sure, and I'm in the same boat with majority, so.
So Trustee Kazan, we had a conversation about not only this, but a bigger picture about opportunities that are out there, and we're a very small shop here, we're in tune with the EDC, but you want to mention what we talked about?
Yeah, I actually, as they are saying, we spoke last week, there is money out there and there are grants out there. As a matter of fact, the most recent, we went as a group to the DCEO last fall, I guess now. And they explained to us the $50 million grant at the time. Now, because of COVID, they had fast-tracked $25 million for shovel-ready projects in our area. And after speaking with both Dave Marfell and then also Alicia Herman, we determined that we probably weren't shovel-ready within 90 days to apply for any of that $25 million. There's still another $25 million. And by the way, that was a revolving, like as your application came in, they could disperse the money. It had to be nothing less than $500,000, but nothing more than $5 million per project. So if you do that math, not very many communities in Illinois are getting that money. But, I mean, it's an amazing initiative. But, there's another $25 million that we could apply for, and Dave and I have spoken, and he has, we've talked about the idea of maybe getting some hard numbers together for things like fixing a well, and that type of thing. And then in addition to that, we know that there's more federal money coming. So I think taking advantage of those dollars is critical for our budget. And we've talked about, I threw out there the idea of maybe even getting a grant writer on staff or paying someone on the side, because when you look at some of these applications, I know we all just went through it with the paycheck protection plan and all these different things. They are not easy. I mean, I've never written a grant. I'm happy to do it and maybe Eric Miller with Illinois Municipal League has been really forthcoming and forthright and said he would help us. But I mean, you really need to know what you're doing, because you can do the whole application and have it thrown out by making one or two mistakes or having information not there. So it's an idea, and I just want everyone to know that that is something that we may be discussing.
So there's a lot going on, and we're trying not to miss any opportunity, but.
Actually, we're doing one right now. Dave and I met today for the Peoria County Rural Residential Recycling Grant application. So,
please tell us about that.
Oh yeah, so we talked in our last meeting about composting and recycling. They offer this for a lot of different types of recycling, whether it's metal or plastic. We would be applying for composting in our area. It's a small grant, but it would be like the first initiative for green in our community, and KDB again has come to the rescue of allowing us to use a location on one of their properties. Why can't I remember the name of the company, Dave, right now? That
Better Earth Logistics.
Better Earth Logistics, thank you. It would be in conjunction with them, and they have these kiosks where we can actually reduce the amount of waste that goes into landfills and that type of thing, and then they create dirt. And I know that you, Mayor, have said you've used actually that product. So we are on it. We're working on these types of things.
So let's continue this conversation about not missing any opportunities. So let's get that on the agenda then. Okay. Again, Madam Clerk, for a follow-up, if you could do some more research.
I will.
Okay. Anything else under miscellaneous?
Okay.
Trustee Gett?
I make a motion to adjourn.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Aye.
Before I bang the gavel, thank you all. Great meeting tonight. Thanks for your participation.